In my last video, I exposed what really happened when Tommy Robinson punched a man at a soccer match a couple of days ago. I shared with you the real footage, proving the news published worldwide was absolutely fake. I introduced you to the source of that lie, an Antifa supporter who calls himself, and even the mainstream media refers to him as a journalist. The response has been incredible. Between YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and even Instagram, the video has already had over 200,000 views, and people are finally starting to question Mr. Mike Fake News Stutchbury. I showed you in that last video how this same Mike Stutchbury proudly and publicly supports Antifa, the violent group prescribed as a domestic terror threat by US law enforcement agencies. But what I forgot to include was this perfect example of Mike calling for violence, which I then tweeted as part of the thread. Honestly, after sharing this screenshot, I thought he'd take the opportunity to distance himself from his own words and maybe even apologize for inciting violence in the first place. But no. Mike doubled down and gave the most bizarre justification and then went on to deflect. I think his people calls it gaslighting. Let's read again precisely what he wrote. Punch them, never stop punching them. This post by definition is an incitement to violence. But not only is Mike Stutchbury not banned from Twitter, but he has now also become a respected voice in the mainstream media. They even have him writing opinion pieces for him. Seriously, a guy who calls for real violence on our streets. How the hell does his opinion matter? But his response yesterday was incredible. Mike justified it by saying, and I quote, "I made that first statement when white supremacist groups gathered in Charlottesville. A young woman was killed the next day by a far-right extremist." He then throws in a wild allegation that I've spent years associating with Australian neo-Nazis such as Blair Cottrell and Neil Erikson. Like most things he writes, total fake news. Both Blair and Neil don't like me very much because guess what? I'm a proud Jew, you absolute moron. Later in the thread, he provides proof to that claim, an article which was written by Jews Against Fascism, who are about as Jewish and anti-fascist as Hitler was. But let's not get sucked into his attempt to divert the conversation. Let's unpack his answer for being exposed for inciting violence. I made that statement when white supremacist groups gathered in Charlottesville. A young woman was killed the next day by a far-right extremist. So what's he saying? Is it that a group of people he disagrees with were gathering so it justifies inciting violence against them? And to be clear, I obviously strongly object to white supremacy. Or is it too that Mike predicted that one nut job was going to kill someone after he tweeted, so it justified him inciting violence before the violent incident even took place? And by the way, he encouraged violence against them, plurals, not just the killer. Like, I'm just telling you that. I'm just saying. Imagine this for a second. Muslim groups were gathering in London, for example, and someone who opposes the Islamic ideology, for the sake of argument, let's call him Tommy Robinson, tweets, punch them, never stop punching them. Would that be okay? What about if after Tommy tweeted that, a Muslim carried out a jihadi attack? Would that then retrospectively justify Tommy's incitement to violence? No, I don't think so. I don't think you'd give him that. Mike realized he got exposed and spent his whole day trying to shift the focus onto me. Mostly defamatory statements that, even if they were true, which they're not, but even if they were, have no relevance or bearing on the fact that this man, Mike Stutchbury, who calls himself a journalist and the media loves to promote, got caught using Twitter to incite actual, real violence. Welcome to the world we live in, where double standards and hypocrisy now rule. Let me be clear. If Tommy, or anyone for that matter that I support, ever wrote that about any group, including Muslims, I would be the first to condemn him. But Tommy doesn't, and he wouldn't, because he's not pro-violence unless in the case of self-defense. Meanwhile, keyboard warrior Mike Stutchbury is very happy to publicly incite violence from the safety of his own home. Oh, well, that's only until someone shows up on his doorstep. Oh, and Mike, he also gets very triggered when someone who often gets violently attacked and assaulted decides to finally fight back. The punchline of Mike's bizarre tweeting yesterday was how he ended the day by begging for a job. His entire writing career has been built solely on attacking Tommy Robinson. So if you have work, he really wants you to consider him. But he forgot to mention one thing. He only writes fiction.